Imagine a world where your work week was just 15 hours and your teeth were practically perfect without ever seeing a dentist. Forget owning land, you'd share everything, and your social circle would be an intimate group of a few dozen people you knew your entire life. Life expectancy might average 35, but if you survived childhood's hurdles, living into your 60s or 70s was common, all without many of the diseases that plague us today. Number 9. Your daily grind would be a walk in the park, literally. Your concept of work would be completely transformed. Forget rush hour, deadlines, or staring at a screen for 8 hours straight. Your primary job, securing food, would typically take up about 15 to 20 hours a week. Think about that. A 3 to 4 hour workday, if you even called it that. This wasn't monotonous toil. It was a varied set of activities deeply connected to your survival and the natural world around you. One day you might be gathering edible plants, carefully selecting ripe berries, nutritious nuts, or starchy roots. You'd know which plants were safe, which were medicinal, and which to avoid, knowledge passed down through generations. This gathering was often a communal activity, a chance to socialize while contributing to the group's sustenance. Another day, or part of it, might involve hunting. This could range from tracking small game like rabbits or birds to participating in coordinated group hunts for larger animals such as deer, bison, or mammoths, depending on your region and the era. Hunting required immense skill, patience, and cooperation. You'd be an expert tracker, able to read subtle signs in the environment. A broken twig, a faint footprint, the direction of the wind. Your tools would be crafted by hand, spears sharpened with stone points, bows and arrows meticulously constructed, or traps cleverly designed. Fishing, using nets, spears, or simple hooks, would also be a common way to get protein, especially if you lived near rivers, lakes, or coastlines. Beyond direct food acquisition, your work would include crafting and maintaining essential tools. You'd spend time knapping flint to create sharp edges for knives and spearheads, shaping wood for handles and shelters, or weaving plant fibers into baskets, nets, and cordage. Preparing food also took time. Shelling nuts, grinding seeds, cooking meat over a fire, or smoking and drying food for preservation. Childcare was an integrated part of daily life, often shared among various members of the group. Not a separate, scheduled task. Storytelling, participating in rituals, and simply maintaining social bonds were also crucial parts of your existence, woven into the fabric of your days, rather than relegated to leisure time. There was no rigid separation between work and life. Life was a continuous flow of activities essential for well-being and survival. Your office was the ever-changing landscape, and your colleagues were your family and close-knit community. The rhythm of your life would be dictated by the seasons, the availability of resources, and the immediate needs of your group, not by a clock or a calendar. Number 8. Goodbye, big cities. Hello, tiny tribes. The sprawling metropolises, bustling towns, and even quiet villages of today would be entirely absent from your world. Instead, your social universe would revolve around a small nomadic group, often referred to by anthropologists as a band. These groups typically consisted of around 20 to 50 individuals, though sometimes they might temporarily merge with other bands for specific purposes like large game hunts or social gatherings, reaching perhaps 100 to 150 people. But the core unit remained small and intimate. Everyone would know everyone else, often being related by blood or marriage. This small group size was a practical necessity, dictated by the way you acquired food. As hunter-gatherers, you relied on the natural productivity of the land. A limited area could only support a certain number of people without depleting resources like game animals or edible plants too quickly. Because of this, your group would be mobile, moving camp several times a year or even more frequently, following animal migrations, seasonal plant growth, or simply when resources in one area became scarce. Permanent settlements were not a feature of this lifestyle. Your home would be a temporary shelter, perhaps a lean-to made of branches and animal skins, a rock shelter, or a simple hut constructed from readily available materials. These structures were designed for easy erection and abandonment. There would be no concept of nations, borders, or large-scale political entities. Your primary allegiance would be to your band. Social organization was typically egalitarian. While individuals might be respected for their particular skills, a great hunter, a knowledgeable healer, a captivating storyteller, or a wise elder, there were no formal chiefs, kings, or hierarchical power structures in the way later societies developed. Decisions affecting the group were often made through consensus, with everyone having a voice, or guided by the experience of older members. Conflicts within the group were usually resolved through discussion, mediation, or, if irreconcilable, one party might simply leave to join another band. There was no formal legal system, courts, or police. Social control was maintained through shared customs, values, and the close scrutiny of community members. Interactions with other bands did occur. These could involve trade of scarce resources, like certain types of stone for tools, shells for adornment, or ochre for pigment, exchange of information about resource availability, or finding marriage partners from outside your immediate group to maintain genetic diversity. However, the scale of these interactions was vastly different from the interconnected global society of today. Your world was your local environment and the few neighboring bands you might encounter. The idea of millions, let alone billions, of other humans organized into complex states would be unimaginable. Number 7. Your body would be a super athlete, and your teeth amazing. Living as a hunter-gatherer, your physical condition would be a stark contrast to the average modern human. Your daily life was inherently active. Walking, running, climbing, digging, carrying. These weren't exercises you scheduled into your day. They were simply part of existing and finding food. This constant, varied physical activity would result in a lean, strong physique. Your bones would be denser, your muscles more developed. You wouldn't need a gym membership to stay fit. Survival itself was a full-body workout. Your diet would also be remarkably different, and in many ways healthier than many modern diets. You'd consume a wide variety of foods, changing with the seasons and location. This included lean wild game, fish, insects, a vast array of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and tubers. This diet was high in protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals, and low in saturated fat and simple sugars. One of the most striking differences would be your dental health. Without processed foods, refined sugars, and the abundance of soft, starchy carbohydrates that came with agriculture, dental cavities, would be a rarity. Your teeth, though subject to wear from a tougher diet, would likely remain strong and largely free of decay throughout your life. While the average life expectancy for hunter-gatherers is often cited as being low, around 30 to 40 years, this figure is heavily skewed by high rates of infant and child mortality. Infections, accidents, and predation posed significant risks, especially to the very young. However, if you survived the perils of childhood and early adulthood, your chances of living into your 60s or even 70s were quite good. And you'd likely reach old age without suffering from many of the diseases of affluence that are common today, such as type 2, diabetes, heart disease, and certain types of cancer, which are often linked to sedentary lifestyles and modern diets. Famine, in the sense of widespread prolonged starvation that plagued many early agricultural societies dependent on a few staple crops, was less common. Food shortages could occur due to environmental fluctuations, but the diverse food base of hunter-gatherers often provided a buffer. If one food source failed, there were others to turn to. Your body would also be attuned to periods of feast and famine, able to store energy efficiently when food was abundant. Exposure to pathogens was a constant reality, but the small, mobile nature of hunter-gatherer bands meant that epidemic diseases, those that thrive in dense, settled populations, couldn't take hold and spread as devastatingly as they did later in human history. Your immune system would be robust, constantly challenged and adapted to your local environment. Number 6. Forget mine. It's all ours. Concept of ownership as we understand it today, particularly regarding land and accumulated wealth, would be almost entirely alien to you. Your world would operate on principles of sharing and communal access to resources. Personal possessions would be minimal, limited to what you could comfortably carry when your group moved camp. This might include your basic tools, a spear, a knife, a scraper, simple clothing made from animal skins or plant fibers, a carrying basket, and perhaps some personal adornments, like necklaces made of shells or animal teeth. There was no incentive or ability to accumulate vast amounts of material goods. Wealth, as in an abundance of possessions, simply didn't exist as a social marker. Land itself was not owned by individuals or even by the band. Instead, your group would have a territory that you used, a home range where you knew the resources intimately. You had rights of access and use, but not exclusive ownership in the modern legal sense. Other groups might pass through, or you might share access to certain resource-rich areas. The idea of buying or selling land or fencing it off for private use would be incomprehensible. The most critical resource, food, was almost universally shared. When hunters brought back a large animal, the meat was distributed among all members of the band according to established customs. Gathered plant foods were also typically shared, ensuring everyone had enough to eat. This ethos of sharing, known as generalized reciprocity, was fundamental to the group's survival. It created a strong social safety net. If you were unsuccessful in hunting or gathering on a particular day, you could still rely on others. Because there was no accumulated wealth, there was very little material inequality. Status and respect within the group were typically earned through skills, knowledge, generosity, or personal qualities, not by how much stuff you had. A skilled hunter who shared generously, a wise elder who offered good counsel, or a gifted storyteller who entertained the group would be highly regarded. There were no rich or poor in the hunter-gatherer band. This egalitarianism extended to the lack of inheritance of significant material wealth. Since there was little to inherit beyond a few personal tools or ornaments, social hierarchies based on inherited property couldn't develop. The economy was based on immediate use and reciprocity, not on profit, markets, or accumulation. Your security came not from what you owned, but from your relationships with others and your collective ability to procure what you needed from the environment. Number 5. Your brain would be wired totally differently. Your mind would be a powerful instrument, honed for survival in a world that demanded constant awareness and a deep understanding of your surroundings. Formal schooling, literacy, and numeracy, as we know them, wouldn't exist. Instead, your education would be an immersive, lifelong process of learning by doing, observing, and listening. From a very young age, you would be acquiring an incredibly detailed knowledge of your local environment. You'd learn to identify hundreds of different plant species, which were edible, which were medicinal, which were poisonous, and when and where to find them. You'd become an expert in animal behavior, able to track animals, understand their habits, and predict their movements. This intricate, naturalist intelligence was crucial for finding food and avoiding danger. Spatial awareness and navigation skills would be exceptionally well developed. Moving frequently across your territory, you'd possess a mental map of vast areas, memorizing landmarks, water sources, and resource locations. You'd navigate by the sun, stars, wind patterns, and subtle environmental cues with an accuracy that would astound most modern people reliant on GPS. Your memory would be a vital tool, storing not just environmental information but also complex kinship relationships, social rules, long and intricate stories, myths, and the history of your people, all transmitted orally. Without writing, memory was the library of your culture. Problem solving would be highly practical, focused on immediate challenges. How to cross a swollen river. How to best stalk a wary animal. How to find water during a dry spell. Your perception of time might also differ. Instead of a linear, clock-driven concept of time, you might experience time more cyclically tied to the seasons, animal migrations, and celestial events, or as event-based, time measured by what was happening rather than by abstract units. Abstract, symbolic thought was certainly present, as evidenced by art and ritual, but the daily cognitive demands would be heavily weighted towards concrete, contextual, and ecological reasoning. The kind of abstract, decontextualized thinking often emphasized in modern education systems might be less developed or expressed differently. Your brain would be a flexible, adaptable organ, highly attuned to sensory input and adept at pattern recognition within the natural world. The way you learned, thought, and perceived the world would be shaped by the direct, unmediated engagement with your environment and your small, interdependent social group. Number 4. Art and stories would be your Netflix and Spotify. In a world without television, internet, or stabskeeks, your entertainment, cultural expression, and spiritual life would be rich and deeply intertwined. Art wouldn't be something confined to galleries or museums. It would be part of your everyday life and sacred practices. You might see stunning paintings on the walls of caves depicting animals with incredible realism and vibrancy. Bison, horses, deer, mammoths. These images might have been created for ritual purposes, perhaps to ensure hunting success, to connect with animal spirits, or as part of shamanic journeys. Your tools and weapons, crafted from stone, bone, or wood, might be adorned with intricate engravings or carvings. Personal adornment was also a form of art. Necklaces made from shells, animal teeth, or carved bone beads, body painting with ochre and other natural pigments for ceremonies, or simply for decoration. Storytelling would be a central pillar of your culture. Around the evening fire, elders and skilled narrators would recount the myths, legends, and histories of your people. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were a way of transmitting knowledge, values, moral lessons, and a sense of identity from one generation to the next. They explained the creation of the world, the origins of customs, the exploits of ancestors, and the relationships between humans, animals, and the spirit world. Music and dance would be vital forms of expression and social cohesion. You'd create music with your voice by clapping, and with simple instruments like drums made from animal skins stretched over frames, flutes carved from bone or wood rattles, and perhaps stringed instruments like musical bows. Dance would accompany rituals, celebrations, storytelling, or simply be a way to express joy and connect with others. Your spiritual beliefs would likely be animistic, seeing a life force or spirit in all things: animals, plants, rocks, rivers, the wind, and the sky. There might be a belief in a spirit world that coexists with the physical world, and shamans or spiritual practitioners would act as intermediaries, communicating with spirits for healing, divination, or to ensure the well-being of the group. Rituals would mark important life events like birth, puberty, marriage, and death. There would be rituals associated with hunting to show respect for animal spirits and ensure future abundance. There would be rituals for healing, to appease spirits believed to cause illness, or to thank the earth for its bounty. These artistic and spiritual practices provided meaning, coherence, and a shared understanding of the universe, binding your small community together and connecting you to the past, the present, and the unseen world. Number 3. The planet would be breathing a lot easier. If humanity had remained hunter-gatherers, the Earth itself would be a vastly different place. Your impact on the environment would be, by modern standards, incredibly light. Large-scale deforestation for agriculture or urban development simply wouldn't exist. Forests would cover much larger areas of the globe, teeming with the biodiversity they naturally support. There would be no sprawling cities paving over landscapes, no massive networks of roads fragmenting habitats. Industrial pollution, a hallmark of later eras, would be entirely absent. The air would be clean, free from factory smoke, vehicle exhaust, and the greenhouse gases driving anthropogenic climate change. Rivers and oceans would be pristine, unchoked by plastic waste, chemical runoff from farms and factories, or sewage outflows from large populations. Animal populations would be far more abundant and diverse. The mass extinctions of species caused by habitat destruction, overexploitation for industrial purposes, and pollution wouldn't have occurred. While hunter-gatherers did hunt, and there's ongoing debate about their role in the extinction of some megafauna, like mammoths or giant sloths, in certain regions towards the end of the last ice age, their overall impact was localized and far less cool than that of agriculture and industry. You would live within the carrying capacity of your local environment, as over-exploiting resources would directly threaten your own survival. This inherent feedback loop encouraged a more sustainable way of life, even if not always consciously framed in those terms. Practices like controlled burning of small areas of vegetation were sometimes used to encourage the growth of certain edible plants or to attract game which did modify local landscapes, but this was on a scale incomparable to wholesale land conversion. Biodiversity, both plant and animal, would be vastly higher across the planet. Colloques would be more resilient and intact. Concept of wilderness as a place separate from human habitation wouldn't really exist because humans would be an integral, though not overwhelming, part of the natural landscape. Climate change as we experience it today, driven by the burning of fossil fuels and large-scale deforestation, would be a non-issue. The planet's natural carbon cycles would remain largely undisturbed by human activity. While natural climate shifts would still occur, as they always have, humanity wouldn't be a primary driver of rapid global-scale warming. Your relationship with the Earth would be one of direct dependence and intimate connection, rather than one of large-scale domination and transformation. The planet would, in essence, be much closer to its natural pre-agricultural state. Number 2. No global village, just your local neighborhood. Your technological world would be one of elegant simplicity and ingenuity, crafted directly from the materials nature provides. Forget metals, plastics, or complex machinery. Your toolkit would consist of items made from stone, wood, bone, antler, shell, and plant fibers. You'd be skilled in flint knapping, the art of striking stones like flint, chert, or obsidian to produce sharp flakes for knives, scrapers, and projectile points for spears or arrows. You'd shape wood into spear shafts, digging sticks, bows, and frameworks for simple shelters. Bone and antler would be carved into needles, awls, harpoon heads, and ornaments. Plant fibers would be woven into baskets for carrying food, nets for fishing or trapping, cordage for bindings, and perhaps simple clothing or mats. One of the most crucial technologies you'd master would be the control of fire. Fire provided warmth, protection from predators, a means to cook food, making it safer and more digestible, and a focal point for social life. Communication beyond your immediate band or neighboring groups would be virtually non-existent. Spoken language would be your sole means of detailed communication, while languages would be rich and complex, capable of conveying nuanced information and cultural knowledge. They would be unwritten. There would be no books, newspapers, or internet to transmit information across distances or generations beyond oral tradition. News of events in distant lands, or even a few hundred miles away, simply wouldn't reach you, or if it did, it would be through a slow chain of person-to-person relay, likely distorted and fragmented. Travel would be on foot. While you might cover considerable distances over a lifetime as your band moved through its territory, long-distance journeys to far-off lands would be exceptionally rare and perilous undertakings. Simple watercraft, like dugout canoes or rafts, might be used for crossing rivers or short coastal voyages, but there would be no large ships for transoceanic travel. The concept of a global village or an interconnected world community would be entirely unimaginable. Your world would be your local landscape, your band, and the few other groups you might occasionally encounter. Trade would exist, but it would typically involve the exchange of relatively small, high-value or exotic items that weren't locally available, perhaps specific types of stone for tool making, shells from distant coasts, or pigments like ochre. There would be no bulk trade of commodities or complex economic networks spanning continents. Innovations and new ideas, a new tool-making technique, a different hunting strategy would spread very slowly, if at all, relying on direct contact between groups. Life would be intensely local. Your knowledge and concerns focused on the immediate environment and community. The vast diversity of human cultures existing simultaneously across the globe would be unknown to you. Number 1, your family tree would look more like a bush. The fabric of your society would be woven from threads of kinship. Your identity, your responsibilities, and your social connections would be primarily defined by your relationships with relatives both close and extended. The band itself might feel like a large, extended family. Child-rearing practices would be quite different from many modern societies. Children would likely be raised in a more communal setting, with alloparenting care by individuals other than the biological parents being common. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, older siblings, and other members of the band would all play a role in looking after and teaching the young. This shared approach to childcare would distribute the responsibilities and strengthen social bonds within the group. Children would enjoy a great deal of freedom, learning primarily through play, observation, and imitation of adult activities, rather than through formal instruction. Their play would often mimic essential adult tasks like hunting, gathering, and tool-making, preparing them for their future roles. Gender roles would exist, as they do in all societies, but they might be more flexible and less rigidly hierarchical than in many later agricultural or industrial societies. Men often, though not exclusively, focused on hunting larger game, which could involve long treks and periods away from camp. Women typically concentrated on gathering plant foods, which often provided the majority and most reliable portion of the group's caloric intake. They also usually took primary responsibility for child-rearing, food preparation, and crafting items like baskets and clothing. However, these roles could be fluid, and women's crucial economic contributions through gathering often afforded them a significant degree of autonomy and influence within the group. Decisions might be made with more equal input from both men and women compared to more patriarchal societies that developed later. The nature of marriage or pair bonding could vary. While some form of long-term partnership was likely common, practices such as monogamy, polygyny, one man with multiple wives, or even occasionally polyandry, one woman with multiple husbands, might have existed depending on the specific customs and ecological circumstances of the group. The choice of partners was often guided by rules of exogamy, marrying outside your immediate kin group to foster alliances with other bands and maintain genetic diversity. Cooperation would be the cornerstone of family and band life. Survival depended on everyone working together and sharing resources. Elderly members of the group, far from being a burden, would be highly respected. They were the repositories of accumulated knowledge, experience, and wisdom, crucial for decision-making, storytelling, and teaching younger generations the skills and traditions necessary for survival. Your family in this context would extend beyond the nuclear unit, encompassing a wider network of kin and collaborators, forming a resilient and interdependent social web.